Let's see. We're on. We're having a little trouble with our microphone. Is it working now?
Okay, so I'm going to end the stream.
Okay. I think we're working, right?
No.
Is it working?
That was the last one.
Okay, let's see if this is working. Let's see. We're going to test it one more time.
Is it working?
That was the last one. Yeah.
Okay.
This is working.
So we're live, and hopefully you can hear us. And we appreciate you joining us. We started the day with the morning service, and remembering this day of September 11th. That was also Shabbat, and also Shabbat Shuvah, the Sabbath of the days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when we focus on this notion of tshuva. Tshuva as an answer, as a response to a sheila, a question, a challenge. Tshuva as a return, where we return our stuff, we return the things that we've taken, we give them back, where we return to God, where we return to those moments that have transformed us to try to understand them and learn from them. And then, of course, tshuva as a shift, a way to be unstuck, a way to transform and change. So this was that day, and this afternoon we went with our grandchildren to Art Hill, where a veterans organization, I believe, put up 7,500 flags. And I expected them to be those tiny little flags, but they weren't. They were big, beautiful flags, right? And on each flag, on each one of those flags, was a name of someone who was lost at the Pentagon in Pennsylvania, in the Twin Towers.
Also in the various operations since 9/11, the service people.
So the people the first responders, and when we walked in, the very first area that we walked through was of the firefighters. And, our 5-year-old grandson is very curious. So he wanted to read all of the names, and he said, they're all firefighters. They're all firefighters. And he said their names, and he looked at their pictures, and, it became a very personal experience, I think, as much as it could be 20 years later. But, we think about the children that are born into a post 9/11 world. Our littlest grandson was born into the pandemic. He doesn't know a world where there's not masks and quarantines.
I was looking for that picture of, they called him, he was the chaplain.
Oh, Michael Judge.
And I put his story, I can read his story.
It'd be nice.
I love that story.
Yeah, he really was such a hero. He ministered to all the people that day. I think your flashlight's on.
It is?
Oh, no, maybe not.
I have that. You want to see it?
Yeah, read the story.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll make Havdala.
Remembering 9/11 and Father Michael Judge. They call him the first listed casualty of 9/11. And this has a epigram at the beginning from the Talmud. There's a part where it says, there are not less than 36 righteous persons in each generation who receive the Shekhinah, the inner presence of godliness. In every generation, there are a finite number of stories that authenticate, define the generation. In every event of significance, every catastrophe, every jubilation, there are a certain number of stories, 36, 31, 10,000, 36 stories that define the catastrophe. The defining story for me of 9/11 is the story of the firefighters of New York City, and a particular account of those firefighters given by a board member of the Fallen Firefighters Foundation, Vina Drennan. Her husband, Captain John Drennan, was killed on the job in 1994. She was interviewed by Noah Adams on All Things Considered, not long after 9/11. And I heard it, and this is what I heard listening to it on the radio. Pardon the mistakes, I transcribed this myself. I heard it in the afternoon, and then it moved me so much that I waited till the nighttime when they replayed it. And I listened again, and I transcribed it myself because I wanted to have it. So this is a conversation, an interview by the radio interviewer on All Things Considered at that time. His name was Noah Adams. Mrs. Drennan says, "We went down to the firehouse, which is below 14th Street. I went to the wake of one of the firefighters. They have a sense of optimism. They had decided to pray to my husband, who they feel still watches over them. And they said, 'Captain Drennan, show us where the 11 missing members are.' And one young one said, 'I knew just where to put my shovel.' Ladder 5 is so comforted that they were able to find 5 of their own and return their bodies to their families and honor their deaths in a proper and magnificent funeral." All things considered. Mrs. Drennan, are you saying that those on the scene believe that the spirit of your late husband helped them to find those who were fallen? Mrs. Drennan, yes, you lose your religion after a large crisis, but you sure get a spirituality about it. Noah Adams. There's a photograph of something you don't often see in the magazines in the recent U.S. News and World Report of firemen carrying a dead man. The Reverend Michael Judge, Fire Department chaplain. You know him, 68 years old. Mrs. Drennan. He was one of my best friends. All things considered. As you know, he was administering last rites and was killed by falling debris. Then she told the story of Michael Judge and how he had comforted her after the death of her husband, and how he had remembered her on her anniversary every year thereafter. Mrs. Drennan, when he prayed, it was the most blessed thing. You felt that his prayers were a direct hotline to God. All things considered. He was a Franciscan priest. Mrs. Drennan. Michael was administering last rites to a firefighter that had just been hit by a body of a woman. People were falling out of those towers so they wouldn't burn. In the midst of this, here he is kneeling and giving last rites. The firefighters, when they realized he had perished, they carried him up to St. Peter's Church, and they laid out his body on the altar, and they put his rosaries in his hand, and they pinned on his fire department badge, and they prayed over him. Later that night, they wouldn't let his body go to the morgue. They brought him to their firehouse, and they laid him in the back room, and the friars across the street of St. Francis of Assisi came and they lit candles and said a vigil. He was beloved by every firefighter in the city, and the fire department will grieve many, many years for the loss of his beautiful life. There are a number of stories that define an event, 36, 30, maybe 10,000. And one of those stories may be the one that saves us. This is the story that works for me.
Beautiful. You know, as I said this morning, every year after 9/11, when I would take the 10th grade, the confirmation class to New York, we always went to Ground Zero. And in the first, I guess maybe in the first 4 or 5 years, the first kind of memorial that was set up by the families. It was called the Family Memorial. And even when there was a more fancy kind of memorial that started to grow and build up, we went to the Family Memorial, the one where the families volunteered to come. Survivors and family members who consider themselves survivors came and told stories. And I have to say, it started, the tour always started at the firehouse. And the story always started with Michael Judge, with Father Michael Judge. There wasn't a time that we didn't hear the story of Father Michael Judge. It kind of was the thread that held a lot of the stories together, was his heroism, because he brought together so many worlds, and nobody was other to him. That was another one of the messages of his and the legacies of his life. And I guess that's part of tshuva. We don't get to choose the events of our lives. We don't get to choose sometimes what life does to us, but we do get to choose the tshuva, the response, how we respond, what we take with us and what we dare return to, and how we let it change us. And it does change us. I guess maybe we don't have a choice sometimes of how it changes us, but to be very aware, maybe, to be very conscious, to do the work, to understand the changes that happen. So we let go of this awesome day, this day of dread. But this year was not just Shabbat, the 20th anniversary of September 11th, the day that changed the world. Not only was it Shabbat, but it was Shabbat Shuvah. And I hope in some way it's a sign that maybe we will be changed in ways that change the world. So we light the candle. We began Shabbat lighting candles, and we end Shabbat with the Havdala candle, the braided candle. I hope everyone got to see those flags. I wish I had a good picture of it. It's a beautiful sight on Art Hill. 7,500 flags, each one with a name attached to it. And a story. Each one a whole world. When I think about our own loss, and how it's changed us, I just wonder, as broken as the world is, I sometimes wonder why it's not more broken when I think of the families who have lost their children, lost their loved ones. But we human beings, capable of such terror, but we are also capable of wonder. Let it be wonder that brings us into the new year, that grows the moon in the sky so that on Sukkot something wonderful is revealed. Something beautiful is seen in the light of that Sukkot moon.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri agapeh.
Joy, the promise of the fruit of the vine.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei v'samim. Creator of the variety of spices, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei miorei ha'ed. Creator of the lights of the fire, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavdil ben kodesh ben or l'choshech, ben Yisrael yamim v'sheshet yemei ha'maaseh v'yom hashmini. Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh l'choshech, who distinguishes between the holy and the not yet holy.
I had a conversation today with Yavila McCoy. Yavila McCoy is a fourth generation African American Orthodox Jewish woman. Grew up in Crown Heights, lived for a while in St. Louis, now lives in Boston. She's spent most of her career doing the anti-racism work that we need in the Jewish community, but in the world. And you know what she said to me today? She said, I've stopped fighting. I've stopped demanding what I know needs to be done. And I've just spent time listening. It's time, she said, for reconciliation. It's time to make peace. It's time for the truth to lead us to restoration. So maybe that's what this year will bring us. That Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, will come. Not to heal us. We don't heal from these wounds. But like my friend Joy says, to restore us. We can be restored.
Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David,
Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hakilati. So this week, these days of awe, they are bringing us to that Yom HaKippurim, to Kol Nidre, and that day of atonement that brings us at one-ment. The day that we dare not only to look at ourselves, but to look at the sins of humanity, take them on together to heal the broken heart of the world.
Eliyahu Hanavi, Tishbi. Eliyahu Hanavi, Giladi. עוד יבוא משיח בן דוד. אליהו הנביא,
תשבי.
אליהו הנביא
הגלעדי.
עוד יבוא משיח
בן דוד. Shavua Tov, everyone. It's been a day, a bittersweet day. Sweet because it's Shabbat. Sweet because it's Shabbat Shuvah. Bitter because we remember this anniversary of the suffering, the destruction, and the legacy of September 11th. But maybe, just maybe, the fact that it was on this day, on this Shabbat Shuvah, on the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, on the Shabbat, the first Shabbat of 5782, maybe, just maybe, we'll be a little bit further along on our path to redemption. Shavua Tov, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you Wednesday night for Kol Nidre, CRC 7:30 Central Time, Kol Nidre. And then we'll spend the next day together on Yom Kippur and end with Yizkor and Nila. And then be ready for that full moon on Sukkot. Shavua Tov. Thanks, Jimmy.